Okay, today is Tuesday, August 6, 2019. This is a meeting of the Acushnet Board of Selectmen. Could we have all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda today is the minutes for the regular session of April 8, 2019, as well as the executive session that we had on that day as well. Are there any motions?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the minutes of the regular and executive session board of the Selectmen's meeting of April 8th, 2019, as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask a question?
Any discussion? Absolutely.
If we vote minutes and a motion and a second been made and it's all approved, if we find errors in those minutes at a later date, can we go back and recorrect that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Bring it back to this body with the suggested
It mentions
changes.
a lot of budgets and a lot of different numbers
Yep.
in the budgets. I just want to make sure it's accurate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just a motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Next item, under meeting mail, we've got a letter from Barbara Mello regarding town hall hours. Apparently, she's very happy with the town hall hours, which again are still in trial period. We've got extended hours on Tuesday and a shorter day on Friday, and we've got to consider that. I believe that's on the agenda for the next meeting to look at that and consider whether we want to continue that program into the future or not. So.
Correct.
Let's just, we'll thank you for the letter, Mrs. Mello, and we'll put that on file. Thank you. Our first appointment at 5:05, our only appointment at 5:05 is with Kevin Pecos. And Kevin, thank you for joining us. To the community, to those that don't know, our town administrator, Mr. Noble, Brian Noble, has been with us for 2.5 years, has resigned for another opportunity, and will be with us till a date to be determined, but something like August 29th, probably. So the Board of Selectmen met in an executive session to talk about that a week ago, but in considering how we're going to go forward and what our options were, I spoke with Ms. Noble and others and talked about what we've done in the past when we were in this position 2.5 years ago. And Mr. Pecos was suggested as a resource to the town of Acushnet. You helped the town of Acushnet through our last vacancy, and I thought it'd be helpful to bring you in to talk about what our options could be for replacing Mr. Noble in 3 weeks' time. And we do have a couple of items on the agenda. We've got your presentation, and then we've got a discussion as a board about what our options are for succession and how we're going to go forward with that. But Mr. Pecos, I guess I'd invite you to the podium to talk about how we could work with you as the town of Acushnet and how you could support our efforts in replacing Mr. Noble as you helped us in the past. So.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be here with you again. It seems like such a short time ago that I was sitting over there as your interim TA. So, brief conversation I had with Roger on the phone was to suggest to him there might be a couple of things I could do for you, and I would be very happy to do them. As you know, I'm semi-retired at this point. I'm not making my living really actively being a town manager anymore, and I'm not seeking interim town manager positions, but occasionally something will come along, and sort of much more in the mode of offering to be helpful to communities where I know folks is kind of a way to get me out of the house, and my wife likes that a lot, so
Our request.
so I do try to get me out and be productive. Plus, I'm retired too young, and really still an active person. So I like to find something to do. So when I spoke with Brian, called him up to congratulate him when I heard the good news. One thing led to another in the conversation, and I asked if there's anything I could do to help you folks. I'm not ashamed to say I get very fond of the place and the people who work here when I was here last time. So if I can help you, I'd love to do it. By the same token, if you think you get an idea, the board has an idea of what you want to do and where you want to go, and that's great. Wish you well, but a couple of things you might want to consider that I'd be happy to help you out with. I don't know if you made any final decisions on interim yet. If you haven't, I'd be happy to do it. If you understand there's some consideration for another town employee to potentially do it, and that's great. If the board decides you want to go in that direction, something else you might consider is having me offer some support, some backup. Most of the time when communities have an existing employee do that, obviously another employee who's not a town administrator isn't trained to be a town administrator. So there's a lot of things, and I know lots of towns have the fire the police chief do it and that sort of thing. And I've gotten calls from, I can't tell you how many police and fire chiefs who are very honored and happy to do the work, as would any town employee be, but frankly understand that they're not trained to do it, and so they run into concerns when they get into subject matter that requires them to do things that they're not really trying to do. I mean, I would never suggest to you that I could be a police chief or a treasurer or any of the other jobs that folks are in towns do. But certainly could be a town manager, and after 42 years of doing it and another 4 years, I think, of being an interim, perhaps the board would find that there's a need to do some backup for somebody else on your staff that you give the title to, and I'd be very happy to do that. It's not just experience, but I think having been particularly in the role of an interim town administrator, which presents some special challenges, frankly. That's some expertise that might be helpful to the board, and/or if you have one of your existing staff members assume the role. It's always the case when you're an existing staff member and you're doing a certain job. Then you become the interim town administrator. Not only, is that person sometimes called upon to do things that they're not trained to do and could well use some assistance with, but you also, as a town administrator, I'm sure Brian will attest to this, get asked to do some things that are, politically difficult. I mean, one of the joys for me in my career was shouldering the burden for difficult things and, frankly, sparing my board. Taking some of that upfront burden off the board. That's tough to do sometimes, particularly for an interim who does it, and then 3 months, 6 months later goes back to doing their regular job. But in the meantime, they've made, what could be some potentially difficult political decisions, or represented the board at a town meeting or a public meeting doing something controversial. When they go back to their old job, they're in a tough position having done that. Again, an interim who's from the outside, I'm able to really very, very vigorously represent the board's interests and the agenda that you set, without having to worry about, if this is a controversial representation for you, what are the consequences for me personally, because it doesn't matter, frankly.
Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Pecos, can I jump in? So I think in the conversation we had, I think we need help in 2 areas. So, and we've made no decisions regarding an interim town administrator yet. We're going to talk about that tonight. But as a lifeline to that person, wrong term, but support. An 800 number they can call when there's a question and they need help and they need guidance. I think that's one role. I think, the one that I'm more concerned about is how we replace Brian, and how we replace Brian correctly and quickly.
Well, your options there are fairly limited. There's basically two options, really. One is hire a professional recruiter. The other is the board tries to do it yourself. The professional recruiter world, there's really only 3 out there anymore. There's MRI, which is a company out of New Hampshire. There's the Collins Institute out of UMass Boston, my alma mater for undergrad, and the gentleman whose name is slipping my mind.
Bernie Lynch, Community Garden.
Bernie, thank you. My senior moment. I have those occasionally now. It's great. And Bernie, who does recruiting. All of those folks are going to charge you probably somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000. Last time I engaged them, about 3 years ago, I think we paid about $17,000 to the Collins Center. The Collins Center also does what they call a mini recruitment, So they charge about half what they would charge for a full recruitment. And they do, less services, obviously. The thing I would caution you, and I'm not in any way disparaging the professional recruiters, they do a great job. But they do a lot of things that I frankly, having been a participant in the process either as an applicant for years or been a participant being on the sidelines working with them as an interim town manager, I frankly wonder the necessity of having it done. So, for instance, one of the things the recruiters typically do is they'll develop a community profile. And they'll spend a fair amount of time doing that, and a fair amount of that budget I just described. Well, that's well and good. There's certainly nothing wrong with that, and they'll put that profile out there with the job advertisement. I've always felt strongly that candidates should be doing that themselves. They should be developing their own community profile. They should be doing the homework. They should be engaging themselves in learning the history of the community, what the issues are, reviewing the newspaper, reading the selectmen's minutes, looking at the town warrant. I used to, as a standard practice, I'd go to town, a week before applying, and I would have coffee, get a haircut, and talk to the realtors, and I would engage people in the community and ask them, what's the town like? Well, that's exactly, you're developing a profile of the community. You're sizing up if this would be a good match for you, and would it be a place you'd want to work. So to me, that's something your candidates should be doing. You shouldn't be paying somebody to develop a profile which they then read. That's too easy. They should be doing the work themselves. Moreover, it tells you something about them. If your candidates are willing to do that, it says good things about them because you're putting in the time and they're expressing the interest. So one of the things I chatted with Roger about is I'd be happy to assist the board by doing the recruitment. And you really, have a couple of decisions to make with respect to whether you hire a professional recruiter or not. You need to decide, do you want a screening committee or do you want to do the recruitment yourself? The norm, and it's sort of all over the place these days, where they have receptions for candidates. They'll bring in 30, 40 people from the community. They'll rent a facility, and the candidates float around the room and meet people, and people size them up, and people in the community submit reports back to the selectmen or to the screening committee. The norm, to the extent there is one, seems to be a screening committee composed of prominent citizens in the community who look at the initial set of applications, pick out 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 to interview, and give the board a reduced number that you actually interview. One of the problems that now makes this process a lot more complex than it used to be is an AG ruling from 2 AGs ago that any candidate resume that the board sees is a public document. So if the board wants to do the recruitment entirely themselves, every single candidate's resume, everybody who applies, is going to be publicly known. And she's been very specific about that requirement. And on several occasions where I've helped out with recruitments, town of Northfield comes to mind. Once the board understood that was the case, and we dialogued with the AG's office to see if we could get around it, and they were unyielding, the board quickly decided they wanted to have a screening committee because, frankly, if every candidate knows their resume, their candidacy is going to be public, you're not going to get as many applicants as you would otherwise get because there's folks that don't want to be exposed to having people know they're looking until they're at least a finalist. Now, once candidates are finalists, they know that's going to be public. And so typically what will happen during a recruitment is when you move from the status of an applicant to a semi-finalist in front of a screening committee or a professional recruiter, or however you set it up, people know that's confidential. Their name is not out there. When somebody gets selected as a finalist who's now going to be presented directly to the board, they are called and their permission is asked. You are about to become a public candidate. Are you okay with that? And I've had people say no, because they do the math, they figure who's the other candidates, I don't think I've got a chance, I don't want to be exposed to the possibility of having repercussions in my own community, and so they decline. I've seen that happen, I can't tell you how many times. So I would strongly encourage the board to consider having some interim step, whether it's a screening committee or however you want to do it, have an interim step, somebody that, you know, has a job to look at the semi-finalists and presents you with a list. Now, the list of finalists can be as big as you want. You know, it can be 3 people, 5 people. It's kind of how strong is your appetite for doing those, what turns out to be fairly lengthy interviews.
Mr. Pecos, you could help us with that process?
Sure,
the
happy to.
The screening committee process?
Yeah. And if you decided you wanted me to do that, I know Kev will remember this, the last time I was here, I was free. I was in a situation that time, I didn't charge the town anything. I had finished, whereas retirees were allowed to work a certain number of hours each year, 960 hours, or a financial dollar amount, and I had hit that. I was just finishing up an assignment with Southbridge. I had hit the 960 hours. It couldn't be paid anymore in the year. And in fact, Southbridge, the candidate that they picked couldn't get to Southbridge for 2 months after I was scheduled to leave. So I ended up working for them for no charge also. And as I said earlier when we started, I don't mind doing that. I love the work. And like I said, it gets me out of the house. So I love doing it. But also when it is the case that I am allowed to be paid, I do like to get paid. I think my services are valuable, and so hopefully. So if I were to do the recruitment, the coaching, whatever it is, I don't have set numbers anymore for this sort of thing. I sort of leave it to the community. I just say, look, you tell me what you want me to do, because whatever it is going to make me happy, I'm fine. So in the case of the recruitment, if I were to do the recruitment as a set piece for you, I'd do that for $4,000 or $5,000. That's less than a third what you're probably going to get charged by anybody else. And I want to emphasize, for that, I'm not going to do what they would do. They will do other things. I just question, frankly, the necessity of some of those things they do, and if that's something you want to have happen. And I'm familiar with the history. Last time when I was here, we had a recruiter and it didn't go so well. And so, I'm sensitive to the fact that you might be sensitive to that fact too. So I don't offer you that thought in a vacuum. It's obviously in the context of some history.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Pecos, that you're aware of the universe of potential candidiats out there? And
The what, I'm sorry?
you're aware of the universe, and
the nice
there might
thing
be
is,
people you have in mind already?
not doing this work, but over to the side, I do health insurance consulting, and I'm in a lot of town halls on pretty much a daily and weekly and monthly basis, and I'm in constant contact with folks out there. And right now, it is a really difficult environment. If you saw the Beacon this month's issue, I think there's 5 town administrator jobs open right now. There's probably another 4 or 5 that are in process. So it's a very unusual environment right now. I haven't seen this in my 40 years, except once in the 90s when we had for some strange reason about a bunch of jobs. I think what's happening is the baby boomer folks like me are retiring. Some of these are termination, separation agreement situations. As you all know, town managers are like baseball managers. We get fired for not doing our job, and we get fired for doing our job. So some of these separations, there's some very good people out there. There's some good talent, but it is a hyper-competitive marketplace right now. For you to get good candidates is going to require a solid outreach, somebody who knows the municipal administrators that are available, can talk to them honestly, and interest them in putting in an application. Most of the recruiters can do that. I can do that. So that's to me, the key thing that a recruiter does for you is the outreach. It's building your candidate pool so you get as many good qualified candidates in front of you as possible. It is not the case that every TA who's qualified would necessarily be a good match for the board. And as I like to say, lots of work goes on with recruiters with trying to discern what the board wants, and it is a big, complicated process, and I've been through the process, assisted with the process, been involved in every phase of it. And frankly, after the gigantic description of what you want gets developed, The candidates that come before you may or may not meet that profile, but what you're going to pick as 3 board members is going to be the candidate with whom you have the best comfort level, the person that you think you can work with. And that's hard to describe, to put on a piece of paper, and try to put on the, you're going to say things, the recruiter's going to say things to you like, do you want somebody who's able to, no, we don't want that. We prefer to have somebody who can't get along. No, you're going to say yes, and so to me it becomes a bit of a cliche exercise in identifying a whole bunch of things that everybody would obviously say, yes, that's what a town administrator needs to do. But the bottom line is, when those candidates get in front of you, however they're presented to you, it's going to be the comfort level that you feel, because all of them should presumably be qualified. Somebody has screened them, and they're qualified. I kind of like, to be candid with you, I like the screening committee approach, where you get, folks in the community, and who puts the screening committee together? You do. And so you select people. I saw one process I thought was great. Each selectman picked 2 people to be on the committee, and then you sort of consensed your way to a 7th person, so you had a 7-member screening committee. So you had people that were on there that you knew personally, that you had picked personally, each board member had, at least a couple, and were prominent people in the community, folks that you trusted, folks that you thought represented the community, and you used those folks to pre-screen these candidates because you had good confidence that the people that were on there that you knew would do a good job and give you good candidates. And that gets you around that problem where if you're going to do it yourself, then you're going to really reduce your candidate pool because they're all going to be known if they apply directly to the board. So I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if that's
Yeah, go ahead.
everything
Mr.
you...
Gasper has
Oh,
questions.
and as far as coaching goes, and putting a number on that, my suggestion to you is if you're going to have some, again, I'd be more than happy to do the interim town manager work. If you're going to have somebody else do it, you want me to sort of do some coaching and filling in and doing some of the technical stuff, figure out what you want to pay your other person, figure out what's left in the budget, after Brian is paid the contractual benefits that he's due, and then figure out what the hourly rate you can afford, and if you want me to do that work, just know that whatever you figure out is fine with me. I mean,
So I can answer that real quick for you.
yeah,
There's
not
nothing-
zero though, Kevin, you're not
there's
giving me a
nothing left.
second time.
There's nothing left, because after contractual obligations that the town has with Mr. Noble.
Yeah, but remember, I majored in finance, so you can't get me a second time for
And
zero.
we pay somebody as an interim, absorbing some of that salary that goes through, and then you hire the new person, unless you do that under the current salary of Mr. Noble, there's nothing left for you.
So,
So I'll answer
Mr.
that.
Chairman, I'm a budgeting expert.
Yes.
I've received many awards in it, so I'll take a look at your budget.
Yeah, that's fine.
If I determine that, that'd
I'm
be
sure we can find some money if we decide to go that way. So, when you talked earlier on making finalists if the board chooses to do it, can you back that up? Because when we went through that process and we had a so-called recruitment, right?
Yeah.
You remember perfectly
Yes.
clear, Mr.
Yep.
Pecos, so I know you're an intelligent man, so I don't have to remind you of the past.
Yeah.
However, when we did it, we the board, the second go-around, we did it from 3 different remote locations.
Right.
And they weren't known candidates. So there is a way for the board to still do it if the board so chooses, just you can't do it in a meeting and then be a
Yeah,
condition
what you did-
finalist, and then you're made public. So
Right.
we could still accept applications and resumes, look at the resumes and decide as a board which 3 we would want to
You
bring
can.
in as finalists, and interview in remote locations like we did last time when you were here.
Yeah, you can do that process.
Okay, so it's just an option, we didn't mention
Sure,
that option.
absolutely.
but
So
it's
one more,
an-
I'm confused, say that one more time.
That's the
Say-
option where the board does the recruitment directly, no screening committee, no middle person.
So,
You can do that again. The last time we did that, and I was very happy to assist you with that, the board made the conscious decision you were going to give that a shot because you'd already done a recruitment
Yeah.
with a recruiter.
yeah.
You'd thrown the wide net out.
Mm.
You had not seen all the applicants. You only saw the finalists. And I think it's fair to say that the board just thought that the candidate pool was not what you'd hoped it would be. And so when we went back out, the board took the reins and said, we're going to do the recruitment from the get-go. Now, that was a little different environment. It was kind of safer because the candidates that applied, a couple reapplied that were already known to you, and then some new folks came in, Brian came in, obviously, and at that point, you had a very limited candidate pool the second time around. It was only 5 or 6 applicants, a lot of whom had already applied the first time around.
A few of them, yeah, a couple of them.
So, in that situation, the risk of reducing your candidate pool, because candidates knew they'd be public the minute they applied, was okay, because many of them had already been public.
But were they known public right away? I don't recall.
They have to be legally, if someone asks. Now, I will tell you as a point of
Okay,
absolute
absolutely.
fact, you'll be asked. You know, the press will say, if the board does the recruitment itself, the press will say, we want to see the file folder of all candidates. Now, those of us out there, well, not me anymore, but TAs out
I
there in this
understand.
field know this. So they know
Yeah, of
that if the
course.
board does recruitment, that's why when you look at the Beacon and the ICMA job listing, you don't see boards doing direct recruitments anymore. It just doesn't exist.
So can I ask you something on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go.
Follow-up question? So, we were given some samples from Ms. Leonard on how we would want to advertise a town administrator's job, kind of like what we did last time, but it's really, we're going seeking new candidates, reopening the poll or whatever it was. It was a little sloppy, to be honest with you, when I read it this time around, but it works. Nevertheless, but there are in the Beacon, it said, and I have copies right inside here, it says send letters of resume to the Board of Selectmen. So in those towns, Raynham's one, I think Clarksburg's another, in those situations, what is happening to those resumes
They've all
if they're
got-
directed to the
They've all
Board?
got screening committees. I'm actually very familiar with almost all of these jobs being advertised because I'm
So
actually...
why would they send resumes to the Board of
Well, you can
Selectmen?
still have the resumes come to the Board of Selectmen, but the minute the resumes are delivered to the board, anything you see is a public record. That's the law.
So it
If
would-
those resumes come to Town Hall,
I would see
Attention
it,
Board of
but I
Selectmen
can't
candidate,
give it to you.
Okay.
and then they go to a recruiter,
Okay, I
or they
recall
go to a
this now.
screening committee, they're not public. Then that entity, whoever it is, has the job of screening them down to a list of finalists. Those finalists, when they go before you, are public. Now, there was a community not long ago, I won't mention the name because it's pretty embarrassing to them, who set out an excessive number of, quote, finalists to a screening committee. And what they're really trying to do is they're trying to circumvent the AG's ruling, because the AG's ruling says finalists. So they said, well, these are semi-finalists, so they're not public. And the AG said, sorry, if the Board of Selectmen sees a resume, it's a public document, end of story, no discussion. Everybody got released publicly, and there was almost a lawsuit all over, because a couple folks got exposed to some negative consequences in their community where they were, and had they been asked, they probably would have said, what, I'm gonna be one of 7? No.
So, Mr.
I'm not,
Pecos,
I'm out.
So is it fair to say the minute a resume or an application becomes available to the 3 of us, or 2 out of the 3, it's become a public document?
Yeah,
So
there's
we
no-
couldn't even look at it individually?
No. The only things, public documents, are the 8 exemptions under the statute and to the open meeting law, and materials that are related to that. So for instance, if your attorney gives you a document related to a potential lawsuit, litigation, and remember, it's got to be litigation, not threatened litigation. That was also another ruling. So the attorney gives you a document related to litigation, then that document is confidential. So you get it, but it's still confidential.
So if we get-
Candidate resumes, by definition, are not confidential under
So
the law.
if the documents go to Mrs. Leonard, and she gets 20 resumes, she makes 20 copies of each, we each get a package of 20 resumes.
Public
We-
document.
We never meet to discuss it, we each get individual packets.
Doesn't matter.
It's still a public
document.
It's still,
Absolutely.
okay, no, just want to clarify, we don't
And
discuss
if
it.
there's, if you folks
Who
have
tells
any-
them that we got a copy other than
I will.
Ms. Leonard?
I take the
And us
fifth.
3.
If you have any doubt about that, I would strongly urge the board to call your town council and have them verify that, because it's important for you to have confidence that what I'm telling you is accurate.
I kind of like that community that may have done it. See, we did a screening committee here. Unfortunately, that whole process, because of the recruitment company, we won't mention any names, kind of got too intertwined into the committee's head and started doing too much of the job of what the committee was supposed to do versus what his job was defined to do as a recruitment agency, and then tried to steer the committee into recommendations and answering questions for.
Yeah, and I'll tell you,
So, the community that did the gig where Mr. Cabral respects 2 or 3 individuals, it doesn't matter, the more the merrier, right? You might have 9 members on the committee, he might pick 3, we might all pick 3. He respects 3 individuals highly in the community, I respect 3 individuals highly in the community, you know, never done anything with town government, they don't have to be on a board or a committee, they can just be respected individuals that, and it's same thing for him, and let those 9 sit there and
that works.
screen out, you know, the weed through the 20 or whatever it may be, and say, we think that these 5 are the best, absolute best, the other 15,
Yeah.
they don't fit the bill at all, I don't see them in this community at all. I think maybe that would be, that's an interesting perspective to put on it.
And should it be only one member of this board that sits on the screening committee?
No, you can't sit on the screen.
No, not a single member of this board?
No.
None, okay.
Remember,
We do the last.
first of all, yeah, you know,
Even that pool can change, right? So if the screening committee goes, say we do the 3-3-3 rings to make it 9, okay? So, you know, better opinionated from the community than a couple of people, right? So you get 9, and we do it that way, and they screen 20. Say we get 20 applicants, right? Because, I mean, anybody can sit down if we name an interim. The interim can sit in on this as well, right?
yes.
As an advisory capacity.
Yep.
Right, not as a
Yep.
committee member, but in an advisory capacity, whether it be you, whether it be our town accountant, whether it be our police chief, fire chief, pick a name, and we can have anybody we want in the advisory capacity to be
Yep,
there.
absolutely.
Along with the show, right, which might be a good idea as well as some of our long-term department heads to do this.
One thing to be
When
careful
they
of.
screen down to 5, they become finalists, right?
Those finalists
We-
go to you and they're public.
We then have to know, before we say that the board chooses these 5 as our finalists? If I recall this, the board has to notify them before we consider them as a finalist, say, the board is considering you as a finalist, do you want to be a finalist?
Correct.
Because that's public knowledge at that point. And some people say you were holding a job, a decent paying job somewhere else, but you know what, your relationships went sour, and you said, you know what, I'm here, but if I don't get the job, then it's gonna make my relationship even more difficult, so you know what, I'm not comfortable with that at that point. You can back out at the last minute.
Right.
Just because some people are gung-ho for the job in the first part of the process, in other words, the screening, they might come here, they might change their mind after they go through the committee and meet with folks and things of that nature. They might say, hey, you know what, Kev, I don't want to be
Yep.
considered anymore, I'm out.
Yep.
So if I'm going to be considered one of the finalists, take my name out. And that goes back to the screening committee, and we have to say, hey, we have to pick one more to give the Board of Selectmen 5, because this guy here, or this woman here, punched the ticket and said they don't want to be considered a finalist.
That's correct.
That's the way it would go,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. And one thing I want to caution you about, whatever you decide by way of, if you bring in a professional to do recruiting, be careful of the role you allow the recruiter to have. I've seen recruiters have what I consider too much authority in terms of screening candidates out. If you could have a screening committee, then have the confidence in the people that you choose to put on the screening committee to cull down the candidates. Don't give that responsibility to the professional recruiter. Sometimes do that. So you've got a recruiter from outside the committee who knows nothing about you and your traditions and, you know, the political expectations. They try to learn that by interviewing you and setting that profile up and having a discussion with the board of what are the things you're looking for. And I regard that as a plastic, and that entire activity is completely plastic, because no human being can be that good discerning what a community wants, and particularly what a board wants, when they have no concept of the milieu and the character and of the community. You're far better served, in my opinion, to let the screening committee serve in that role, because they do know. They're citizens of the community. They're people you know and trust. And so they'll do a good job for you in screening through those applicants. They know what the community wants. That's why the model of having a screening committee is pretty darn close to universal at this point. can't think of a recruitment recently. I remember doing some years ago that didn't have screening committees, but I can't think of one recently that didn't have one. In fact, the trend is going the other way. Now you're seeing community do some things that are interesting, like Mansfield. I remember vividly when I applied to Mansfield. They had 3 candidates. They rented a big room at a hotel. They had all the staff there and a whole bunch of citizens, and we stood around, having an adult beverage, and none of the candidates did, me included, but everybody else was having a nice time and had food, and it was great. And all you did was walk around and hobnob all night, and then afterwards people would tell the selectmen what they thought. But they had gotten it down to where it was only the 3 finalists at that point when they did that. So towns are going more toward having a lot more people involved in the selection of the manager than just the board. It's gone completely the opposite way. And you know what? It probably makes good sense, because manager has to come in, hopefully he's going to be here a few years. Board members may stay on, board members may get off. So board picks a candidate 2 years later, and I remember Ashburnham Well, I had a dream board. I love those guys. And 3 years later, not one of them was on the board. And I remember saying, I'm going to stay here as long as the 3 of you are here. And 3 years later, I left too. But you think about it, and the board's going to change. Hopefully the manager's going to be around, for a while. And so engaging other people in the community to come be part of the process is just a good idea. And then you might have on that screening committee, who's going to work with a person. So.
You never know who a future selectman is. People just decide to run for office, and the people are the ones that elect them, and it's only if the people elect you, you're a future selectman. If not, you're nothing.
I got to tell you, Kev, when I was telling Dave, when we were out in the hallway, when I served on a board of selectmen 40 years ago, 6 months before I ran, I'd have never in a million years thought I was going to run, until a bunch of people said you should give it a shot, and I did, and turned it into a career. So you never know. You're right, but
Yeah. I kind of like that idea, though.
Mr. DeRoche, any questions or anything else?
Not this time, no.
Mr. Gasper?
No, I'd just like to thank Mr. Pecos for coming down and
happy to
visiting Acushnet again. And before you leave, stop by one of the ice cream shops. And
He's got dinner.
My wife is out in the car.
Yep.
She refused to come in because she said, I'm not coming in here. And
You left
sit
the
in that
windows.
room."
Oh, you're rotten.
Come in and say hi to everybody, But
Right,
so she's out in the car. I promised her
Windows are
dinner,
down, right?
so I'm going out to contribute to the local economy.
All right.
Thank you.
So, y'all have a good time.
Thank you.
If I can answer any questions, I'm happy to, and I really do sincerely wish you the best, whatever you decided. I got a real
Thank you.
soft
We
spot for
appreciate it.
Acushnet, I admit it, so.
Thank
good
you.
luck.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is related, Town Administrator Succession Plan and Discussion of Options, review of votes may be taken. So, been reflecting on this for the last week, how we go forward. We talked about, should we do a search ourselves? Should we get a recruiter? I reached out to Mr. Pecos, brought him in. There have been suggestions for, I think we need someone in the interim town administrator role. There have been a couple of suggestions for people who could fill that role. There are a couple of ideas I've had myself as to who I could fit that role. Ms. Hebert's here today, I think is a strong candidate for that. Our town's Director of Finance for the past few years, I think would be great in that role. Very honestly, Chief Gallagher has also been suggested as someone who could fill that role quite well. Or we could go outside of the town for an interim, an outside party, bring them in as an interim director, and there are people like Mr. Pecos that do fill that role. My preference would be to put an internal candidate in that role and maybe figure something out with Mr. Pecos so he could be a hotline if there's an issue that comes up that they need support on, because it's certainly a complicated job, and we need to support who's ever in that role. So
Plus, the interim would also be responsible for the current responsibility.
Absolutely, well, absolutely, yeah, it's absolutely,
Current
it's the
duties.
job they've got now, plus, so it's 2 jobs in 1. So obviously, we're gonna, something's gotta slip a little bit, because I don't think it's possible to do 2 jobs in the same, in the same work week, but, hopefully we'll have a permanent replacement town administrator quickly, quickly is the goal, so,
Well, this was the first I got a date of your departure, Mr. Noble. You said August 28th?
August 29th,
Right.
perhaps?
We have a court case on August 29th, which I'm going to cover.
It's town related, it's town related, yeah. So that's today's August 6th,
6th, right.
So we've
by
got
next.
3 weeks.
Mhm.
And Mr. Noble's he's got some vacation time that he's gonna use. He will be available to us as a resource if we need to speak with him. He's promised to come in here once a week and deal with bills and other town business, things that.
I won't leave you high and dry.
Yeah, so,
I'll do everything you ask me to do. You've been really good to me, so I will be, very careful not to abuse that relationship.
I appreciate that. So, Mr. Chairman, when he's considering by next meeting, we make a decision. Now that we know what our options are.
Yeah.
I did receive a email from Chief Gallagher, and Julie, I haven't had a chance to talk to, see how she thinks about it. So, could take this time over the next week. Mr. Gaspar?
Mr. Chairman?
What, any...
no, go, Kevin, go.
Oh, I didn't know if he was going to ask me a question, he just said...
Oh, no, I think he is, he's asking, what are your thoughts, and how do you think we should...
I didn't see the end part of that to be discussed in open session. I know we have executive session to discuss this, so I'm just...
No, I think we've got to,
I'm thinking that, well, I think that there's more to the conversation that needs to be had. I don't think open session is the exact place to be doing it. I feel that executive session, if we're going to consider internal candidates, and I do believe that that may be a very good option, and now that Mr. Pecos has come down and offered some services, depending on what that may be, along with Mr. Noble, what he's willing to contribute for whatever amount of time that we discuss, I think it warrants an executive session discussion to have with Ms. Hebert that offered some services, Chief Gallagher to the board, and then let the board try to decide, which way we want to go.
I don't think we can do that in executive session.
You can only discuss a contract.
A contract in executive session.
In executive session. So you would have to make the decision of who you'd be interested in entering into contract negotiations with. And you have to do that in public session. And then you can do the contract negotiations behind the closed door.
So on the contract strategies, as we've done before to discuss positions, we can't do that?
It's contract negotiations. You can discuss
We
any
can do that.
negotiating
How about
contract.
contract strategies, what we've done on the executive sessions before, contract strategies to try to come up with a strategy to move forward, to offer a contract,
But
so.
not to discuss who, only to discuss what.
How much money we're willing to spend, how much money we're willing to pay.
Right, those are the things that I'd like to just
The finance-
sit
Which
with
you
the board
can,
and.
you can do that, but you'd have to decide, I want to discuss these 3 people, or I want to discuss the opportunity to offer a contract to X number of people.
So we have
by
executive
name.
session on tonight?
We do.
You
Yeah, we
do,
do.
to discuss a
So-
contract for an interim.
We still gonna go into executive session tonight, Mr. Chairman?
If we need to, yeah, if we need to.
I think that
I put it
would-
on here, I wasn't sure.
I think it'd
I
be
said let's
prudent
put
to
it
at
on
least
the
go
place-
in and
the
sit
place
down for
for-
10 or 15 minutes to discuss how the board plans to move forward.
No, you have to do that in public. The discussion of the contract is what you can do in executive session.
So, yeah, so we, in open session, need to decide who we'd like our interim town administrator to be. In executive session, we can talk about, once we have that conversation, I would suggest that I would approach that person and say, what are you thinking of? What would you like? What do you think that job looks like? What do you think the compensation for that job is for a period of time? And then bring that back to the group in executive session to decide whether.
That first, should the board decide what the compensation would be in the schedule of duties?
We can make
would
an
be
we can
for
make an
that
offer. We can make an offer.
Before we talk to a candidate, and then it's just kind of seems backwards, because let's just pretend right now, we have two internal candidates, Chief Gallagher, Fire Chief Gallagher, and Julie Hebert, our Town Accountant Finance Director, right? We offer it to Julie Hebert, and we say, this is the number that we're gonna put on it, and she declines, and then Chief Gallagher says, I don't like being second in place. So I think that knowing I think maybe then we'll spend the next week until the next meeting, as Mr. DeRoche said, maybe individualized, we'll speak to the two internal candidates, maybe perhaps get a better idea as individuals to get me to say, I feel like this one, to the board and to the public, to our people that we represent, I feel that this is the reason why I would go with this candidate as number one option, this candidate as number two option.
I think it...
Just because it just doesn't seem right that I haven't had a conversation with either one in depth and really get to feel out and ask some, I think, pertinent questions that I would have to ask Ms. Hebert and Chief Gallagher to really say, look, I think both of them are great candidates, right? I don't see anything wrong with either candidate. I really do. I think Chief Gallagher's been here for 30-plus years. I think he brings a lot to the table. Julie, I consider a very intelligent individual. She's been here for a couple of years. I respect everything she's done in those couple of years here, but I just have some questions and concerns that I just need to wrap my head around first. And I thought maybe we'd get that opportunity.
Yep.
But it doesn't seem like we have that opportunity in executive session as a board, as a group,
Right.
to be able to address those concerns. So I thought the strategy sessions would be different, and I'm being
So
told
let me
tonight, no.
Let me suggest this, that what might be an appropriate path forward is that the two of you take the coming week to meet with
Both candidates.
to meet with both candidates and have a conversation with both, and as individuals, and that we come together. We've got a meeting scheduled a week from tonight.
The 13th.
That we come together as a board to at that point make a recommendation, and at that point we'd approach the individual and negotiate the details of what that position would look like and what the compensation could look like.
Can we go into executive session tonight still, Mr. Cabral, to do that? To discuss what we feel?
To
is-
discuss compensation only?
You could,
Yes.
yeah, what a contract for an interim
Yeah,
would
to
look like
discuss
is allowed.
compensation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all.
And then the other thing that I would remind the board is that next Tuesday, we have a social engagement with the library trustees.
6 o'clock.
So an
Ice cream,
executive
ice cream.
session may require you to meet just a little earlier.
We're already
Let me
meeting at 4,
suggest it.
right? Yeah.
So it's 4:30, but okay.
No, 4, yeah, we said
Okay.
4.
So that, as long as you leave
But
yourself
I think
enough
that if the
time.
board members, as we just discussed, Mr.
We have a lot
Chairman.
on next week too,
It's a full agenda, I know.
so 4 might not even give you enough time to get to the library if you do an executive session.
Yeah. And it's ice cream, it's ice cream. It's got to be ice cream.
Could you back it up to 3:30?
At least
I don't know how much is a lot and what the
We
issues
have that
are,
ECA solar,
you know?
we were.
Hamlin Street Bridge.
We were gonna give Dina,
We should talk about Hamlin Street Bridge.
The
Yeah,
plaque.
Hammer Street Bridge.
The what?
Dina, we never gave her the Woman of the Year plaque, because she said originally that the library trustees
We
were gonna
thought
do
that had
something.
happened, yeah, that was a...
So we got her plaque, so we just want to give it, present it to her, like we did for Tom DeCosta, and so we have that, we have ECA solar,
We have the fire contract.
fire contract.
If there's nothing,
Police
if
contract.
there's nothing that's
Couple other
like,
things on- there's like
considered
6 things
emergency
on.
status or pertinent that we need to do, then why?
Well, Ham Street Bridge you have to do.
Right.
ECA Solar, we've made an appointment with them. And I'd really like to do that one if we could. We
Yeah, so
could-
that discussion may carry for a while.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're ready to go on the fire contract. I don't believe we'll be ready with the police contract, but I'd like to try.
I don't think the fire contract's gonna take too much discussion, motion to approve and a little bit of the
So I don't
ins
think
and
that's
outs.
terrible. Your long ones are gonna be ECA Solar, Hamlin Street Bridge. What else
Yes,
did I miss?
yes, those
Okay.
will be 20 to a half an hour if I have my imagination set correctly.
I
As
agree.
far as, especially the bridge, it might take some time, we don't know what that
Could we
discussion.
present Dina at the event? Or does it have to be?
Oh,
at-
that'd be nice.
Well,
May not be
David,
trustees
if
will
it's
be
gonna
there.
We're
be-
gonna arrive there when it's already started.
Yeah.
If it's gonna be,
Yeah, we're gonna be,
Films, though,
we're gonna be wearing ice cream capes and aprons and all that
I
stuff.
mean, this is something we need to
Yeah, absolutely.
move.
If you want to move, well, I'm available at 3:30. If you want
I'm
to,
available at
if you want to
3:30.
grab an extra half an hour and push the things and not make the agenda, take the frivolous stuff off, and that's really,
I'll try to thin it down. If we go to 3:30, we finish early, we just get to ice cream sooner. But that gives
if
you
we're
an
in a meeting, we're
opportunity.
gonna have to go home and change up, because I don't think anybody's gonna go shovel ice cream in suits, right?
I would
I'm showing
assume
up.
that if, with the board's permission, I'd like to dress down for the meeting, so we can go direct.
so
I
there
don't want to be
was,
scooping ice cream.
Depends on how many professionals are coming in front of us.
also
Fair
on
enough.
there is the golf empowerment discussion.
I could postpone the golf environment one day.
The only comment I
Real estate.
would make is that, this is something we need to move on quickly.
An executive session
And I
should
I
be,
I think it can wait another week, but I think we need to be prepared to come in next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I've spoken with both Ms. Hebert and with Chief Gallagher, and I think it's great that we've got two candidates that I think are both very qualified and would be very good in the role. I believe Ms. Hebert would be the more qualified of the two, given the role she fills in the town of Acushnet, but I'm willing to wait for a week to, allow the two of you to do the due diligence. I would suggest that it's individual due diligence, and that
Can we,
the decision's made at the table as a group next week.
today's Tuesday, can we just set,
I mean,
can we do something on, I can come in tomorrow and talk to, I've had a decent conversation with Chief Gallagher, because I received the email as well, so, I only have a couple more questions for Chief Gallagher that I've been rumbling around in my head. I'd actually like to talk to you about a couple of things. And then really, all I gotta do is sit down with Julie, and I think that Julie and I can probably hash this out in 30 minutes to an hour, really. She's already offered to buy lunch, so she said she would do it on her lunch break. So, not a problem. I can, if you wanna do something like that and just kill it.
We get another meeting in?
you gotta do 48 hours notice, so you can post tomorrow morning, you can meet on Friday morning.
I could meet on Friday morning.
It would only be a quick meeting, and when, don't go throwing anything else on there just because, the board's coming in, let's talk
No,
about
just-
this, let's talk about that, let's just talk about the interim town administrator thing and be
That's the only thing
finalized.
on the agenda, that's fine.
If that's what the board wants to do, if Mr. DeRoche is available, we haven't talked to Mr. DeRoche yet to see what his schedule is like, and he's up and working, and, he's got some travel.
I could do the morning of the 9th, if.
That would be Friday morning?
Friday morning, it's Friday
For a
morning.
meeting to,
Just decide who you want to enter
Decide
into
who's who.
negotiations.
The interim,
Yeah.
if we're comfortable using the two internals, or,
Well-
if you'd rather not, and
You'd have to decide to enter into candidate.
right, that's all it is, just a quick, but it's gotta be official meeting, it's gotta be
Yep.
done officially, like Mr. Cabral said, the board's gotta have some discussion on it, and
8 o'clock meeting?
8 o'clock Friday's fine with me.
All right.
Mr. Gasper?
what's
Is
the
that all right with
matter?
you?
What's the matter, why are you guys giggling? Because I'm not up at 8 o'clock?
No, I was gonna take the day off.
You can take the
You can take the day off, it's not something that you need to be
We'll take
here
the
for.
day off. How's that?
That's fine, I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman, 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
Okay.
just to get it off the plate and not be.
Yeah, no, we gotta keep this moving forward.
Well, it buys you 2 extra days. You do it on Friday morning.
Yeah, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Well, no, you figure Saturday, Sunday's a wash, but you pick up Monday and Tuesday.
Okay, so I will post tomorrow, 8 AM. Enter into negotiations with candidate.
No, you're gonna decide
decide
who to go
Oh,
into
okay.
negotiation with.
Ms. Hebert, anything you want to add, or anything we should be thinking about, or? No, it's probably too, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, never mind. I'm
So
sorry.
we have to post by 8 AM, town hall opens
No.
at 8 AM, so maybe we should post
We
tonight.
can post tonight.
So just make sure that it's posted correctly for executive session, so we're not being called
No,
up.
it's
and-
not executive session. it's a
Oh, open
public
session, sorry. All right, so it's not.
But I could schedule an executive session immediately following it, because you could enter into negotiations right on Friday morning if you wanted to.
His time frame, I don't know, I'm open, I can do whatever
I
I
can
want.
do it.
Yeah, I'll leave Friday morning.
Friday
Okay, so
open.
post it for an open meeting at 8 o'clock and an executive session to follow.
Okay, are we done with that? Anything else? So how about Mr. Pecos's proposal? Any thoughts on that?
I think that'll come after we're done talking, after I'm done having my conversation with Ms. Hebert and Mr. Gallagher.
Yeah, but this is the part about, I mean, what do you think about engaging him to find the next town administrator? I'm liking, as I you know, and Mr. Noble reached out to, we got a price from one of the potential recruiters, and the number he quoted is accurate, so.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Pecos would be a great resource to us at a reasonable number, and I think, I suspect he knows candidates out there that might be good candidates for the town of Acushnet. You know, it sounds like the process is complicated. It doesn't sound like, but I would, here's another homework assignment. Let's all think about who should be on the screening committee, and let's all think about whether or
Well,
not.
is that what the board, I mean, I think that's really what the question is. Does the board wants to create a screening committee?
I think we have to.
I think the answer is yes,
I
as
think
far
we
as
have
that
to.
goes. I kind of like that idea. I mean, last time we did it with people that were internal
Yeah.
folks.
And it can be as well this time.
If you want it to be, you can, but it doesn't have to be, and I think that, I kind of like that, you know, bring people from the outside community that don't
Yeah.
necessarily know what's the internals and the politics of everything, and sit
Anyone.
down just with a different perspective and say, you know, somebody that's been here, embedded in the community for a while, you know, not somebody who's been living here for a year, they ain't gonna bring much to the table, but somebody who's been embedded in the community and say, would you like to be, just approach, I'll approach certain people, you will, and if we can get them to say yes, that's the hardest part, right? Invite
We'll be
them.
thinking about, I would suggest that we all think about 3 people and approach them.
I have 3
and
people already
talk-
in my
and-
head
And talk with them.
that have been
and-
here long time,
Yeah,
not
let's-
5 years,
then why
not
don't
10
we- why
years,
don't we think-
long-term
why don't we think
residents.
about that? And they would be, and it can't be us apparently, but,
Nope.
so that would work with, potentially, assuming the group's comfortable, with Mr. Pecos on finding our next town administrator. Does that seem to be a reasonable course of action?
I believe it.
And maybe we can take that vote Friday morning as well. So nothing to do now, but, okay. Anything else before we move on?
Three each, Mr. Chairman.
Three each, yeah.
I think 9 works well.
I
You
think
get a
9
better
works well,
sense
yeah.
instead of a small group.
It's hard to get 9 people to, you're gonna do most of the interviews in a day.
Yeah.
You'd pick a Saturday and you do all the interviews. And
I
9
mean,
is a lot
That's
of
our
people.
problem. That's our problem, to find 3 people that want to spend the time
Well,
doing it.
That's the thing, that last.
Well, let's see what the
last
board
time
comes
we
back
had a
with.
hard
I mean, I got
time
3 that I know will do
getting
it.
people to- Not so much to agree to being on the board, but trying to get everybody to come at the same time.
Yeah.
Let's not
Yeah,
prejudge,
yeah.
let's
You know,
not
people were
prejudge.
busy, people, it was hard.
But if
it
you
was
pick
very
3
hard.
apiece and you have 9 people to choose from, you ought to be able to get 7.
7 of them commit.
So that's probably okay.
Even if you keep, I like the idea of 9. I mean, when you're just, when Roger's going, you know, scouting somebody, he's gonna tell them, it's gonna take a little commitment, you might be there for 2 or 3 hours, and again, the whole rush thing, you don't have to do that. If you have, say you have 6 candidates, you schedule 3 for this day and say you gotta commit 3 hours, 1 hour for each candidate to come in and talk. That's what we did as a board, and it worked out pretty well. So they can come in and bring 3 candidates, only be there for 3. Nobody but if I'm screening 6 candidates in one day, by the 5th hour, that 5th guy or girl shows up, man, I'm tired of asking questions, I'm tired of being in the room, everybody here will agree. It's tiresome, you don't wanna be sitting here doing this stuff, so I mean, you know, we'll figure it out as the process goes along.
So let's each try to three candidates and reach out to them and, okay. All right, so moving on to comparison communities. Do you all have this? Did everyone get this now?
And that's how we did.
So I think this is a neat document because.
Kevin, I realized that Lakeville appears twice on here and I didn't.
The law, I'm sorry, I do have my
Lakeville's
coffee,
awesome.
but
Yeah.
So what this is,
Lakeville's
we'd all submitted to Mr. Noble our list of comparable communities, comparable to Acushnet. We'd all come up with our own lists, and I think we can get through this pretty quickly because there are 5 communities that we all agreed on.
Correct?
We all agreed, so I would say those are all in, those are done, we all agreed that those are comparable communities, let's take those 5. Those are Carver, Dayton, Freetown, Halifax, and Hanson. We all agreed that those are comparable to Acushnet. We've got another 6 communities that 2 out of 3 of us chose. So in some cases, In some cases, you know, it's
Yeah,
either to,
yeah,
it's all over
doesn't
the
matter.
place.
That's fine.
It's all over the place. So I would suggest, you know, depending on how big the list was, I was thinking 10's a good number. Mr. Noble thought it should be less than that. But I'd like to cut it down, but, you know, if we cut one name, we're at 10. And the one name that Mr. Noble had suggested when I was talking, knowing something about the town of Berkeley, he thought the way that government's managed, that maybe
Well, they're a
that's not
part-time town hall,
comparable.
they don't
They're what?
have, they're a part-time town hall. There is no full-time employee in town hall. No full-time town administrator, no full-time secretary, no full-time treasurer collector, no full-time
Well,
accountant.
let's figure out how they're doing it, and let's do that here.
Okay,
That
so
brings that to question.
if we did,
It just means the numbers.
Eliminates OPEB.
It just would not give you much of a comparison community, but if you want it, I'll do it anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so you...
so the other five communities that two of the three of us agreed on, of the other five would be Blackstone, Douglas, Fairhaven, Lakeville, and Whitman. So that'd give us 10. So one more time, Blackstone, Douglas, Fairhaven, Lakeville, and Whitman. And in some cases, in every case, some of these names are names
Sure,
that
and the other
we,
guy just didn't.
yeah, we didn't, I mean, I didn't, Whitman wasn't
All
on,
things
Whitman
being
wasn't
equal.
on my list, but I'm saying the two of you picked it, so,
Yep,
you know,
sure.
I'll.
Sure, so let's just take this, what's your recommendation, Mr. Chairman?
So that we go with, the towns would be, the 10 towns would be Blackstone, Carver, Douglas, Fairhaven, Freetown, Halifax, Hanson, Lakeville, and Whitman.
Do we want 10 towns, or I thought we were whittling it to 8?
Well, may I say, I mean, I could do the research,
Tens-
then you
tens.
could throw out the top and the bottom. It's, you know, or you can just have the data. I'll get you the data, it doesn't matter, but the other advantage you might be able to do is then say, okay, well, you know, this community is insane, and we're not gonna consider this community, or this community is, you know, too much in the other direction. So what if you came down to this, we'll pick 10 to do the research on, and we'll do 8 for the comparison.
And too
by
much data is
eliminating
never
two.
too much data is never gonna hurt us.
I just don't wanna get you into analysis
Yeah,
paralysis.
two things, too much data is never gonna hurt us. Number two, we eliminated one town, you know, do we want to eliminate two more? We could, I can't imagine how long that would take us to get done. So I think having too many towns as comparable communities can't be a problem.
So what's the, do you want to just do this, do you want to do this now?
Yeah, I'd like to,
What's the recommendation?
The
You wanna
recommendation
use
is those 10.
Blackstone?
Yeah, Blackstone, yes, Carver, yes, so the 10. Blackstone, Carver,
Well, Carver's already, oh, you're just naming them all
maybe the
over
10,
again.
maybe the 10.
Okay.
Blackstone, Carver, Dayton, Douglas, Fairhaven, Freetown, Halifax, Hanson, Lakeville, and Whitman would be the towns when we're trying to compare ourselves on whatever, we find out what those 10 towns are doing, and we don't necessarily do what they're doing, but we consider.
It's all about getting the 50 percentile of where the communities come in at, and making sure that we're at least within the 50 percentile for our employees.
And these are gonna be
Make
ones,
it
so
fair
these
and
10.
equitable.
Yep,
That's
and
what
it's
it
not
comes
just
down
employees,
to.
any decision we make as a community, we can look at
Well,
what
that's-
they're doing.
that's
And
what
it's
it's-
mostly employees, but.
That's what it's coming down to, is just making sure that we're equitable to our employees. We're not overpaying, we're not underpaying. It's 50 percentile. We get, within that 50 percentile, we'll be pretty good.
So
That's what it is. Yeah, I'm fine, you know what?
could I get a motion on adopting those as our comparable 10 communities?
I make a motion to adopt these 10 communities as presented.
Second, Mr. Gaston?
I'll second that. So again, for the record, it's Blackstone, Carver, Dayton, Fairhaven, Freetown, Halifax,
You
Hanson.
missed Douglas.
Oh, we're using, well, I just wrote down, because I did look at where, I was unfamiliar with Douglas, an hour and 20 minutes and 70 miles away. Boston's closer, so I just was kind of, if you want to throw Douglas in there, the board of America. Okay, so Halifax, Freetown, Halifax, Hanson, Douglas is up there with Fairhaven, Lakeville and Whitman.
And Whitman.
So Douglas is
Yes.
the only one I didn't write up here, Douglas.
I mean, so that I suspect in every case, there's a town that one of us recommended that we didn't get.
That's-
I didn't think Fairhaven, I thought Fairhaven was too big, so, but I'm, you two believe so,
Population,
fine.
population-wise, and Lakeville, to be honest with you, Lakeville's EQV per capita is quite high, but it, you know, it is what it is.
Lakeville was on our,
It's-
was the
it's-
two of us agreed on Lakeville, so.
Geographically, you have to think about geographically,
That's-
so,
it was
you
all
know,
of that.
if somebody's gonna
Yep.
leave, you know, Lakeville might be that place, so.
But five of the 10 we all agreed on. And
Right,
the other.
It's not perfect,
It's
nothing's
not
perfect, because there's no
No.
identical, there's
Yeah,
no
but
twin brother.
I think, you know, the board did the right thing. I mean, we went after it, we did it, and to be fair, I think there's one town that's, we ain't use it, is West Bridgewater, Roger. Everything else.
What's
we've
West
all-
Brid- I'm the
we've
only
all-
one-
we've
I'm the
all
only one like
somewhat-
West
We've all
Bridgewater,
somewhat agreed with it, right? So it's fine. I mean, we're a.
I'm the only one who liked West Bridgewater, that's fine.
Rochester, we're not using it.
You used, you're the only one who liked Rochester, so, you know, we, so, okay, so we've got our
That's
10,
fine.
we've got our 10 towns.
I think we need a second.
Oh,
I'm sorry, no, we didn't.
I thought it
Yeah, we
was
did,
a second.
Yep.
Kevin did.
Just to
All in
confirm
favor?
it's in.
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, done, good.
Good.
All right, interim police chief contract approval. Our police chief, Michael Alves, who served the town for many, many years, has announced his plans to retire on November 3rd, 2019. And we are in the midst of a search for his replacement. And that process is moving pretty quickly. We've engaged a firm to help us through the process. And we'll get a replacement chief as quickly as possible, but it's looking like, you know, number one, that may not be done by the time the chief leaves. Number two, we'd like the chief to stick around to help the new chief learn the job for a little bit potentially. So we've spoken with Chief Alves about staying on an interim basis and have a contract for the chief that provides for, is it 20 hours a week?
3 days,
And I have read this, I'm sorry. It's just
24 hours a week.
Under the glare of the light.
24 hours, not to exceed 960 hours.
And there's also a limit on his earnings because he's eligible for pension and he doesn't want to forego that. But this
Actually,
is,
did you leave that out of this copy? Because I believe the original copy we had mentioned 24 hours. Is
It's here, 24 hours is under
Yeah.
section 5
Section 5.
on page 2.
once again, I have the copy without all the pages. Page 2, yes.
Oh, I think I have a copy without all the things too,
Yeah,
because
that's
I go
the
from
original
section
thing.
1 to 10.
There you go.
Yeah, page 2 is...
Tisk. No wonder why. Yep. Thank you. It's
No, you
fine.
can hold
Yeah,
it.
there was an hour, there was an
I got
hour, there was an hour.
3 other copies already.
Actually,
5 other
Mr.
copies of
Gasper,
it.
you did see it because you edited this thing.
I know, and it's put the...
So you were the one who actually put that in there.
I know, and that's why I just asked the question, how do I go from section 1 to section 10?
But you've seen
page
this
2 is
before, so you just have a defective copy, that's, you know.
Right, I got a defective copy.
So where, I'm sorry, where is the hours of work?
Section
Page
5.
Section 5.
Says the chief shall devote the amount of time and energy reasonably necessary to faithfully perform the duties of the chief of police under this contract.
Is it intended that the chief shall
All right,
work a
then this
maximum
is
of
a bad
24
copy.
hours?
Oh, we got more bad copies.
24 hours.
I got it, is intended the chief
Okay.
shall work, I got 3
You just
copies
gotta
of it.
throw out the old
I
copies.
got it, there's the old one.
We just gotta start getting one good one.
Come on.
But anyways, so
well,
this
that
is,
way, when I scanned everything,
so now I don't know what I'm approving, because I don't have a good
Yeah, I
copy in
brought, I
front
had all
of me.
kinds of stuff in
Okay.
my trunk, I just
The
read.
version-
Catching all of this, Julie?
It's on me.
The version we're using is the version you gave me.
I have that version somewhere. There's
Yes,
like
you do.
3 or 4 different ones. I got.
You caught the boo-boos and I
I
commend you.
know, I got it. Look good, it looks good. You got all it up? And you put the rate in there?
Yes, sir, I
And the
did.
rate
Because
is,
my copy's not good, so I'd have to.
It's right there on page 2.
all right, so is there a motion to accept the employment contract between the town and
Mr. Chairman,
his title will change to interim chief, Michael Alves?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the contract appointing Michael Alves as interim police chief as of November 3rd, 2019, to serve until such time appointed and successfully transitioned.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. DeRoche. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Item 3 is the signing of the fire EMS contract. That is
We're gonna
held to
postpone
next
that,
week,
yeah.
okay? Approval of the wage agreement for the animal control officer. We had agreed to make an adjustment in the compensation for that position.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Animal Control Officer Personnel Agreement as presented.
And I will second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Under new business, we've got well, it says exception to nepotism policy. I thought we were adopting the nepotism policy.
It's in
The nepotism policy is in the employee handbook, which is out for the lawyers' review. But because it's a policy you guys have already agreed to, I'm now already before you asking for an exception and a waiver. We have an employee, in fact, why don't we have a director step forward? We have the husband of an employee that wants to be the van driver for 4 hours a week. There were no other
We
applicants.
talked about this. I thought we were talking.
We had a very,
Sylvia, welcome.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
We had a very small candidate pool. We advertised, this is a very limited position. It's a 5-hour-a-week van driver position, more if he's filling in for our other driver. We ran the ad on Indeed for a month. We received no applications. Through our Facebook page, we received a few, and we had 2 internal candidates, not who already work for us, but people who are participating in programs or volunteering for us. We interviewed both gentlemen who are from New Bedford, and one kind of came to the forefront. He's very active with us as a volunteer, very military connected, just has a good rapport with our seniors. We thought he would be the best fit. Unfortunately, his wife is our receptionist, so that's where we bumped into
It's a
problem.
4 or 5 hour a week position, you'd say?
Yeah. And they would, their shifts would overlap by 45 minutes. He would work mornings, she comes in the afternoon. She would have no direct supervision over him, but we just wanted to run this by you.
And it'd be every day, like 1 hour a day? or-
No, just on Mondays.
Just on
My other
Mondays.
driver works 4 days a week. The only time he would work more than the 1
You
day a
can
week
make the
is if the
exception
other
of
driver was on
268
vacation.
as long as you guys agree to accept that exception.
So can you give a case so that everybody at home knows what we're doing? If nepotism, if Miss Sylvia was trying to hire her daughter, her son, her cousin, that would be considered nepotism.
Right.
So in this case, we do have a receptionist that is related to an individual that was interested in the job. And, maybe if this was a $50,000, $100,000 salary position, the board might look at this different and say, well, it's not gonna look too good if we do this, and, you set precedents, but it's a van driver, 5 hours, 1 day a week. It's minuscule. We don't have any other candidates. I think sometimes you have to make exceptions to the rule. I spoke with Mr. Noble prior to this. I have no problems with doing this. I really don't, especially helping out the council on aging. It's part of the community. It's something that we have an obligation to do, and, you don't have a van driver, we're in trouble.
Would the appropriate motion be to waive the nepotism policy do we have a motion?
We can make a
Okay,
motion.
why don't you make a motion?
I make a motion to approve exempting the part-time van driver, Mr. Roger Fortin, from the nepotism policy as established in the employee handbook, Appendix H, consistent with Mass General Law, Chapter 268A.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
Oh, this was interesting. No, it's good.
There's also some paperwork he has to submit to the board, to the town clerk's office after they sign it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
We'll sign it tonight.
Okay.
We have it ready?
Fill it out.
Okay, we won't sign it.
Okay, I'll get it.
We'll sign it right away.
Didn't want to presume.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Department of Public Works, I don't think we've got anything. Town Administrator's Report, Mr.
I
Noble.
have one thing for you, and I'm proud to present to you.
I've got one of those at home already.
This is the formal proposal finally from Comcast to renew the cable contract, which expires in November. And I've met with lawyer after lawyer after lawyer ad nauseum. We have a public hearing to go through, so there's some other steps that we're going to have to do before the board can actually vote on this. But you have to do your homework. There will be a quiz. Here is the proposal.
Nice.
I've
got one of
There is, and for those of you at home, this can be read at the town
Yeah.
clerk's office, as it is on file and available at the
come
town
read.
clerk's office. So we'll be happy for public input. The Board of Selectmen will be holding a hearing on the contract as well, which is required under the law. And I would like to tell you that after a lot of back and forth, we came out to exactly where we are today.
which is fine.
So what am I reading this for?
Is
Because
Xfinity,
actually, you really do have to read the darn thing. You're gonna sign this, and I don't wanna hear
Sign
you
it.
whining.
Sign it.
Mr. Noble, Xfinity is the only.
Your only
place, right?
choice.
Yeah.
I
there's
did
no-
reach
there's
out,
no
by the way,
competition.
just so that, you know, you say I do due diligence.
Is it
The
ever
only
wrong?
other competitor to Comcast would be Verizon in this particular case, and not counting Dish, because they can go anywhere. Verizon is not interested, period.
They could only supply the northern part of town.
Well, they're not even technically supposed to be doing that. But we know in some cases where the phone numbers are,
Right, 763.
Yeah.
Yep.
they are able to do that, but, you know, technically
Right.
that's a violation of the FCC rules and regulations, but let's not rock the boat.
No?
How does a company gain a monopoly like that, though? How do you dictate? I thought, you know,
Well, the
free
problem comes
enterprise
down to
was
the
supposed
cost
to
of
be,
cable.
businesses are supposed to compete, and the FTC and the SEC and all those promote that, and you need to keep so many of them in the loop,
Right.
no less than 3, so that it's competition and it keeps prices down for consumers, but
The
this ain't
direct
doing
answer to
that.
the question is our houses are too far apart to make wiring the town economically viable, to make the investment. And of course, you start looking at some towns that are now like Sunderland and Warwick in the western part of the state, which are now doing a cloud-based solution over their community. So the technology is gonna outpace. So by the time a company came in, made the investment to wire the cable
Yeah.
into everybody's house, they'll never get the return on their investment. That's why they're not interested.
But that hasn't been the case for the last 20 years, that
I know.
Comcast has been banging
I
us.
know.
And I'll say it publicly,
concur.
I mean, I hear it all the time from residents, why can't I get files, or why can't I do this, and why? They got a stronghold on it,
Right.
somehow they gained that over the years, and they just can't bring it.
It comes down to, it's uneconomical for Verizon to go in and string the community. And now we watch the numbers of subscribers, and in the last 3 years, they've lost 9% of their subscribers in Acushnet. But
Wow.
in the last 3 months, they've gained back 1.5% of those subscribers who left. So they're getting more competitive, and, you know, you should definitely get on the phone and complain and. see
Now,
what they do
you
for
had some material also.
Yes.
And I figured we'd come back to that eventually about applying for reduced rates.
Yes, those families that are on free and reduced lunch at the schools are eligible for a reduced rate from Comcast for a connection to the internet. Also, there is a small discount for the housing authority,
Mm-hmm.
$2 a month. But hey,
But the
okay.
free and
we'll take it.
reduced lunch
Free and
discount
reduced
was fairly
discount,
substantial,
Very
wasn't it?
substantial, yeah, but it cuts you back to a very basic,
Mhm.
but still it gives you internet.
It gives you internet.
And that's the
cable.
whole, you know, keeping
So I
our.
figured we'd
our-
bring that,
our
we'd bring that
children.
when we
So when,
jumped into
that's in the book,
Right.
and we are going to do, if we sign this contract, one of the obligations are that they have to come on premise and do a promotion to sign people up that are under the free and reduced, which they will also do at the same time that anybody wants to come and sign up with Comcast can come visit too, whether they get the reduced rate or not.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Cord cutting is happening nationwide, I mean, there's so many different,
Actually, the
Roku,
interesting
and
thing is,
you got
I'll bring you an
Netflix,
article.
I mean, Hulu, I mean, you got all these different services that are just,
The interesting thing is, you still need to get to the internet, so you still need somebody, okay? And I'll bring you the Consumer Reports article from this month about how cable is allegedly becoming more competitive. But the numbers actually show that they picked up subscribers this month, which is the first time in 3 years. So,
they had a big thing, T-Mobile Sprint merger, and one of the things was for Dish Network to get part of their
Yes.
network, their wireless network, so they'll be beaming us from the skies.
I think sooner or later, I mean, who the heck knows what the technology will do, but, I mean, sooner or later, it's all gonna be satellite anyway, you know? And what I think the whole new cell phone, 5th generation LTE
5G.
is gonna change how we stream.
Yeah.
So I think that they're very careful entering into a negotiation about, this is another long-term contract for them where the world may change.
Oh, I'm kind of involved in all of this investing wise, and 5G is changing everything along with AI, artificial intelligence, and things of that nature. You can't really have AI without the 5G platform network working, so it's interesting, in the trade wars, that's one of the things with Huawei, the Chinese firm that's supposed
Yes.
to be the big 5G player out there, we don't want their components in the United States, and too late, because most of the traffic things, lights and cameras all operate on Huawei, so it's a big mess, and it's unfortunate that you let us get to a mess, and then you say, how do we unwind the mess? Kind of like our recycling was, where the Chinese were the only buyers, and here we go again, right? So it's like, why would you build a business model where you're solely dependent on one country to buy your goods? It's foolishness.
Speaking of the recycling, I appreciate you bringing that up. So we sent out the
Oh, you wanna talk
recycling.
about that?
And we
Yeah,
pinpointed
yeah.
Kevin's neighborhood
Yep, good,
specifically.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was bad.
And we spent a lot of time in, checking out somebody's recycle. And we put whoops notices on the canisters and what the problem was and left it for sure. So the following pickup, we had a very clean load, but the subsequent load that came from a different neighborhood now was not good. So we have to go to that neighborhood next, because it's killing us on tipping fees. And they could reject and send it back to the community, and then we'd be sorting the trash.
Yeah, it was, we
We
got.
really do need our residents to pay attention to the recycling rules. And I've watched all things Acushnet, and one of the comments was, why just put everything in the regular trash? That can boomerang on us as well, because if you send too much recycle in the regular trash, they can reject that load.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I actually caught it was actually the two girls from our DPW office that was putting the oops tags on. I was told by my residents in my neighborhood that it was somebody flagging it and fining us, and I said, that ain't going on. I said, the board's never got notification of that, but, so it's the Monday pickup, not just my neighborhood, thank you. My neighborhood is on the Monday, my
I want you to
neighborhood
know
is
that we
Monday pickup.
specifically targeted Kevin's neighborhood.
My neighborhood is Monday pickup along with a bunch of other ones. Mr. Cabral, you might get picked up on Monday down in the neck of the woods though?
Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday? So there's a big area that gets picked up, and it was a monster, it was a monster bad dump. It was like over 50% was
Yes.
contaminated, and it's just like styrofoam things and things of that
But it's
nature.
things you
So-
don't think of, like wax-coated milk bottle. It's organic milk, but the milk container is wax-coated, so you can't go into the recycling.
Oh.
The number of plastic bags
Yeah.
in the recycle was staggering.
Yeah, we're
So
off that.
I think it's a matter of education.
You're off it,
We're up.
everybody
Yeah,
something.
We've improved. We're getting
I've
there.
seen
And
some
also,
barrels.
you gotta clean it's gotta be clean. You cannot put food in the recycle.
Man, it's becoming a hassle. It is.
Anything else under the town administrator's report, Mr. Noel?
Thanks, that's plenty. We'll
That's
talk
plenty.
next week.
So our next meeting is Friday at 8 a.m.
Ready now?
here. Meeting after that is Tuesday, August 13th, and we agreed to start at 3:30.
But we're not doing that, because we're meeting on Friday.
So not 3:30, we're
So we'll
going
be
to go
back
4?
to the 4
We're back to
4
the 4
o'clock.
o'clock.
Because we said that we're gonna do the executive session.
Okay, that's fine, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
good.
kick that out of the
Are we
way.
going to executive session?
So you've got
tonight?
that.
When?
Are you going to executive session tonight?
I think maybe we should just go in real quickly to talk quickly about what we're looking for the interim
Yep,
to do
that's
and
fine.
salary, maybe what we can offer as far as the
Sure.
pay scale, and just to try to have some kind of an agreement instead of
Beforehand.
going the opposite way and having Mr. Cabral sit with certain, and then having that discussion, and all of a sudden that didn't work and he's kicked in the teeth.
So we get some.
So let's just get a consensus from
Get
the
some
board to
consensus.
say, this is what we can do, and this is what we're looking for, and we can all talk.
All right, before we get in, there's a bunch of people here. You're not here for us, right?
CBA.
Oh, good, all right, good. I was nervous. I said, what did I do?
They were watching you on
Okay,
TV.
so, yeah, I know.
CBA.
It's my first thought, what do we do? All these people coming in. All right. So, all right, why don't we get an executive session under general law, chapter 30A, section 21A2, to conduct strategy session in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel, interim town administrator contract. As an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining and litigating position of the public body, and I so declare it, we're not going to return to public session. A roll call vote, Mr. DeRoche?
Yes.
Mr. Gaspar?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, we are going into executive session, not to return.